It's Warren Vanderhill with the Center for Middletown Studies project on Muncie's faith communities. Today I'm speaking with Bishop Keith O'Neill, the senior pastor at Destiny Christian Center. The date is February 8, 2017. And I want to begin, Keith, by thanking you for participating in our project. I think it's an important one for the community, and we really value your perspective.
Glad to do it.
I'd like to begin by asking you to tell me about your personal faith journey, how you became a pastor.
Well, kind of grew up in church, just being required to go, I'll put it that way. And then I had a radical change happen when I was 22, it was 1982, and just felt that it was time for me to make a change, and got saved, so to speak, on that day, September 19th, 1982. And within a year or two, I knew that I would pastor at some point in time. Started preaching. I was involved in music ministry from that point, and started traveling in my mid-20s around the country. I had a group called the Gospel Corporation. We traveled and sang and ministered, did different things during that period of time. And over the course of the next 23 years or so, I was an assistant pastor at 2 churches, and did ministry at different levels, preaching and teaching, and music as well, and then planted Destiny in 2006.
Where were the churches when you talk about being an assistant pastor for music? Where were those churches?
Yeah, they were both here in Muncie, both here. One was Faith Center, which is where my conversion took place, and then Christ Temple, which is also here in Muncie as well.
Okay. Well, then go back to the point of origin, I guess, as far as Destiny is concerned, because I want to talk to you some more about that. I mean, at what point does Destiny become part of the picture as far as your life is concerned and your leadership of what became this congregation?
Yeah, 2006, really late 2005, I just really felt like it was time. I was 45 years old at that time, and felt it was time for me to plant a church, and felt pretty strongly about that. I've been having thoughts about it over the course of some years, and planted Destiny. We started at the YWCA downtown with just a few people. Started in my living room, really, with about 8 people. Had our first service as we announced that we were launching the church. There were about 75 or so people at that first service. Of course, all your family members come, from their churches, and every dog, cat, everything that's alive, comes for that service. And then the following week is really where we really actually started, which we had about 35 people or so at that first official service, and we've grown pretty steadily.
Where did those people come from, and what was the draw? Were they in other congregations, or did they know you as someone that they thought they would like to be part of a group where you were their pastor?
Yeah, I think it was a mixture. There were, like I said, there was original 8, felt the call to come with me, and then we just announced we were having service, and then people started coming. And various backgrounds. Some were kind of disenfranchised with church, hadn't been to church in a while, and decided, hey, I'll give this a try. Heard about Keith, heard about his music, blah, blah, blah. And so they've come to just kind of see what was going on and finding out what is going on with this new church. And so we had just kind of a mixture of people coming from different places. Yeah.
And where were you meeting at that time?
We were in the community room at the YWCA. And so God told me to begin like I wanted to end. And so we would go in there about 6:30 in the morning. We would set up everything in there, put out carpet. We had screens. We had the whole thing, and we really transformed it into looking like a congregation and all of that. And we would have a long prayer meeting that morning with those that were there. And then we have to take it all back down and do it every week. We were there for about 10 months before we had our first building. So,
well, then, as you know, I'm very interested in what this was before. We've spoken about that. This was the UAW's Recreation Center. So how does that come about? I mean, I know that right at the point when Warner Gear closed, the UAW decided they were going to pull this back, and then they did the national headquarters in Detroit have this, I mean, as far as the property itself?
I'm not exactly sure how that was working, because at the time, there was a gentleman that I had gone to real estate school with. I ran into at an open house. It's a random thing. We were needing another place to worship, And he told me about this building. I came out and just felt like this was the right place to go. There was some negotiation. I guess they had a vote on a price, and that was already set with the membership. And we made the offer, and they accepted, and here we are.
Okay, so but when you came here, this was an old union hall.
Yes.
A union hall with a bar and a whole bunch of things of that sort. I remember that vividly because of the meetings that the union members had here, quite vocal, shall we say, about things that were happening in their lives to change their lives with the impending closure of the Borg Warner plant.
Sure.
So when you came out here, this was just a big union hall, a big...
Yeah, it was a big open room here where we
right.
were. None of the walls were really here, just a big open room. Yeah. And we did about 90% of the work in here. Our guys, gals, we came in and just renovated the place, took out the ceiling, which the whole roof was about 12 feet. Yeah. So we took out all the ceiling tile and all the grid and all that business and opened everything up. And it took us about 3 months or so to get everything changed around. And here we are.
So at the end of that period, that's when you had your first services here?
Yes.
So this is 2006?
This is 2009.
Yeah, it's later than that, I thought.
Yeah. When we left the YWCA, we actually had a 3-year stint at what was a physical fitness center right across the street from the mall, right across from the Rooster Tail Saloon, as a matter of fact. They were 6,000 square feet there. And we had a three-year lease, and after that lease was up, we came here.
Came out here.
Yeah.
So the real start date, to get this on the record, is 2009.
2009 here, yes.
Okay. What do you see as your main responsibilities here?
Simply put, really to lead and feed, for just to be simple about it. I think the vision that God has given me for ministry and for empowering others and to preach the gospel has to do with just leading people to a deeper walk with Christ, number one, and also to build them up, as the scripture talks about, the fivefold ministry gifts, building up the people of God for the work of service. So my job basically is to equip and empower them to do what God has called them to do out in the marketplace or wherever they find themselves.
How would you characterize the condition of your church right now? Membership, participation, things that are going on right now at Destiny Christian Center?
Yeah. I think it's pretty strong. We've got a very diverse church in every way, really. Right. And we're pretty strong. We've been through some things just because of the American culture. I'll talk more about that maybe a little later. But very, very strong. Things are going well. When I talk to some of my colleagues and some of the people that I know even regionally, not as fortunate, I would say, as we've been, but God has been faithful to us, and I think there is a bright future as long as we stay the course.
Well, what's your membership number right now?
Our membership is about 400, and it's pretty steady. We have 2 services on Sundays, and we're about at 400. Yeah.
Do you have aspirations to become much larger than that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, my feeling is we're in the redemption business, and so our goal, of course, is to reach as many people as we can possibly reach. This is Muncie, Indiana. This is a small community, so to speak. So nationally, the mega church number is supposed to be 2,000 on the weekends. But in Muncie, Indiana, I think we would be approaching that for most people in this area. So I think we're going to try to grow, sure.
So it'd be fair to say that you have aspirations, given that mega church number in America, to try to become a mega church in this area.
Yeah, that would be a goal, sure.
Okay. What is you're an independent congregation, so I meet you on the street. I'm meeting you here now, and I say, what is the basic theology of your church, Bishop O'Neill?
Well, we take all of our theology straight from the Bible. When people ask what type of church we are, my normal response is we believe Scripture. We believe everything in the Word of God. We believe in everything that it says and everything that it represents. So we try to meet the needs of people from a socioeconomic standpoint. We try to preach the gospel as Jesus did and presented truth to them. We try to walk in love. One of the parts of our mission statement, love God, love others, and serve the world. And so it's not just from a spiritual perspective, but we also try to meet the needs of people in their daily lives as well. So.
Okay. Aside from membership, what do you think are the most significant challenges facing your church community?
That's a really good question.
Well, you mentioned you threw in, and this is I'm an American historian, so I had to go back to this. You threw in American culture.
Yeah.
And the challenges and changes that are occurring in the larger culture, not
Sure.
just in the Munsey's Middletown culture, but in the larger culture.
Yeah.
And perhaps you could comment on that aspect of this.
Yeah, I get asked about, I call it more intercultural than I do multicultural these days, but the mixture of the races here is obviously very unique for the American church in general. Yeah. And probably even more unique for this particular geographical area.
Right.
Some of the challenges that are relating to what's going on in our culture, obviously, are the racial challenges and divide and all the things that are going on with that. Unique to us, I suppose, is the fact that I'm a black pastor, which makes it even more unique that we have such a diverse congregation. But because of the diversity and the racial divide in our nation, the things that come up, that kind of spike that happen in our culture, it hits us as well. You know, when Barack Obama won the nomination the first time, we had to deal with some things and remind people that we're not voting for a pastor, and that we need to remember what our principal call is and who we are as a congregation. So we kind of weathered that storm, and then when he won, of course, we had to deal with that. And then, you know, the second time, and now we have the situation with Donald Trump and all the divisiveness that goes with that. And so we've had to navigate some of those things and just remind people of who we are. Before we're black, before we're white, we are Christian, and we are to exemplify the principles of the Bible and what Jesus taught.
Well, I mean, this is the most atypical congregation that I know of in the community. I mean, you come to worship here. It's a large congregation. It's a very enthusiastic congregation. But the first thing that strikes you is that, and I may be a little off on my percentages here, of the 400 some odd people who are here, half of them are white and half of them are African American. And there is no other church that I have been to here, and not very many in other places where that is the case. Yeah. And I guess the question I'd pose to you quite directly is, how did that happen? Why is this congregation such an atypical congregation?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get a little philosophical here, and then I'll give you, I'll maybe part down just a bit. Yeah. I think it's a work of grace.
All right.
I give God the credit for it. I can't say that I'm the smartest guy in the world and that I set out to make this all happen, although I've been open. I think a lot of it has to do with my upbringing. My parents are educators, and so I always was involved in multicultural type environments because of their occupations and where they allowed me to be. And I grew up in diverse neighborhoods and those kinds of things as I grew up. Didn't know that God was preparing me for a comfort level like that. I was an associate pastor at the largest church in our county. Right. And was about 99% Caucasian there.
Yeah, that's right.
And got exposed, and Greg has been just a great mentor for me. So I think God prepared me for just the practical side of it, but I think God is trying to make a statement. That's just my own opinion, that 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is not necessarily, or doesn't have to be, the most segregated hour in America, at least not here.
Right,
and that's one of the things, one of the mantras that I talk about here specifically often, and to remind us that we have something in common, and that if we allow God to do it, it doesn't have to be that everybody's divided. And so I think God has made a statement through us.
Except that when you started out, you had pick a number of 50, 75 people. Now you have well over 400. And again, these people come from African American background,
Sure.
white background, and they gather here.
Sure.
You think that what draws them here is the opportunity to be part of a congregation that is like that?
I think sometimes I've had people actually say that exactly how you've said it. You know, the reason why I came is because of the diversity. Mm-hmm. I think there is, in our changing culture, we have a lot of interracial marriages, a lot of interracial relationships. Right. And so we have people who have come from different backgrounds who are getting together that would feel more comfortable having a diverse congregation. I think that's part of it as well. But I think also, I think that we have to be deliberate about what we're trying to do. And that's the one thing when I get asked this question, well, how do you do that? I said, well, you know, you have to do things on purpose. We are different. People are different. They come from different backgrounds. They have different experiences. Mm-hmm. And so you just can't ignore that. If you ask most pastors, they will say, hey, we're open to everybody.
Yeah, sure. They
well,
all do. Yeah.
Not really. Because all of your music is one culture, all of your style, the things you say over the pulpit, your programming, it all speaks to a certain culture most of the time. Mm-hmm. And so by doing that, you are excluding the cultures that don't fit into that mold. Yeah. So what we've done, and I believe God has just given us some wisdom to some extent, is that we've tried to pay attention to all of those things as much as possible. Mm-hmm. My own personal background has helped a lot. We have been incentivized to try to make it happen. So we try to have diversity in our music. We try to have diversity in our staff. That was very deliberate to do that. And so anytime you do that, you lose a little bit of who you are to just like a marriage. You know, I love my wife, but I don't agree with her on everything, and vice versa.
But she's your partner in this.
She is. She's my partner, and so neither one of us can have our way completely all the time. It just doesn't work that way. Yeah. So I think you have to be specific and you have to be deliberate about, hey, we want this to happen. We just began about 6-7 weeks ago to reach out to the Hispanic and Latino community. We're doing that as well. We've got a translation going on during our second service now, and we're being deliberate about reaching out to them as well. Yeah. And they're different as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
What role do you see for this church in the wider community, in the wider Muncie community?
Well, I think we are positioned here to be a blessing. I guess that's the main thing. Our principal call, of course, is a spiritual one, redemptive, but also just to be a blessing. We do a lot of social things here in terms of providing food and clothing and different things. We partnered with one of the elementary schools to provide things for them. And so we're trying to take a leadership role in bettering our community. I have a relationship with the mayor, and we try to get involved as much as possible in things that are going to enhance the community.
Okay. Are there specific programs that you've been involved with in the community? I mean, one thing I would say is you're a little bit out geographically from the heart of the city, if you will.
Sure.
So, but you do things that reach back into the community.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, we're partnered with Harvest Soup Kitchen. We provide lunches for them. As I mentioned, we're partnered with Grissom Elementary School. We provide all kinds of materials and things like that for their staff and their teachers. Yeah. And so we try to get involved. Sometimes we partner with churches like Union Chapel when they have Serve Week, things like that, where they do different things in the neighborhoods. We partner with them. And so there are a number of things that we get involved with throughout the year. We provide meals and things like we have picnics and things like that where we invite people to come to our campus and eat for free and have fun and bounce houses and all of those kinds of things for kids. And so we try to do as much as we can.
Well, you have all the acreage out here, I assume.
We do.
Okay. So do you do anything with, what is it, 26 acres or something?
We've got 22.34 acres to be exact.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Well, we try to utilize it as much as possible. We have softball tournaments out here every now and then. We've had some people wanting us to put a fence up, which I have poo-pooed
Right.
pretty strongly because people come out here during the summertime almost every day. They're playing ball out here. We put some lights up for them, and we've got a softball field out there that they utilize. Some of the leagues come out here and practice for free. And our plan is to eventually smooth out about 6 or 7 acres out here, and we're going to put some soccer fields and some other things out there just so the community can use them.
So there are some opportunities to utilize the space that you've got out here.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. As you're well aware, in the last few decades, Muncie has experienced incredible economic and social change. In what ways have these economic and social changes impacted your church? Have members of your church been affected by the economic downturn, by the job losses, by what we've called the deindustrialization of the community?
Yeah, we have. What comes to mind immediately, we have at least 2 of them. There may be a couple of more that were directly involved when Borg Warner shut down, and they were just shy of getting their full retirement and all those things in.
30
so that,
in,
yeah, that was a very unfortunate thing.
Okay.
And the fact that the industry has largely left this area has changed the lifestyle levels of some of our congregants as well. They've had to kind of refigure and retool themselves to try to find other jobs, get used to less pay in many cases. What we've also noticed here is there's been quite an increase in calls that we get for help. We have a benevolence program here where we actually help financially not only our own congregants but also those who call from the community. We have a committee. I don't have to make those decisions anymore, thank God, but we have a committee that they appeal to. They fill out paperwork, things like that, that we're willing to help. But those calls have increased significantly in the last several years, and so we've noticed the effect of all of that over time.
So there are specific examples of individuals in your congregation that have really had their lives changed.
Oh, absolutely.
By what has happened in the community.
Absolutely.
Has it caused any kind of out-migration as far as people who are here who, because of those kinds of economic changes, have had to leave the community?
There have been a few. There have been a few that actually have taken, and one I can think of right now off the top of my head, that have moved to Texas and found another job and just not wanting to necessarily relocate, but that was where they could find a job that would pay them what they felt like they needed to be paid. So, yeah.
You were talking about the church's commitment to the economic and social life of the community, and I know this is a fairly young congregation, but in the time that you've been the pastor, has the commitment to the community changed at all? I mean, have you had to take on more challenges, or is it pretty much in 2009 we were doing these kinds of things and now we're still doing the same kinds of things?
Well, the vision of what we feel like we're called to do has really not changed. What has changed probably is the scope of the help that we can provide as we've grown, as we've have more resources available. As a board, our board, we decided on upping the level of giving, not only to local agencies and local missions, but also national and international. So our outreach has increased just because we've had more availability of funds, but our commitment to it has remained strong from the very beginning. We just have more resources available now.
I mean, I guess that what I'm asking is, this is a tricky question for a pastor to answer. When you look at the community, I mean, do you have plans to try to develop additional programs to meet some of the difficulties that you see as a congregation in the community?
Yeah, I think every congregation has their niche, for lack of a better term. What I have felt to do is in the area of daycare, is in the area of reaching children.
Yeah.
We have a lot of teachers here, a lot of people who have been teaching at all various levels.
Right.
And so we have a daycare in our footprint here. We just recently purchased a building in Yorktown that we should have open by the end of March. That will hold about 130 kids. And so we've decided to take that route.
Is it pre-K?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And so you might be familiar with that building. It used to be Kitty Academy out there on Pilgrim Drive.
In Yorktown.
In Yorktown.
So here you are on the east side of Muncie.
We're going straight to the west side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it'll be an additional location. We'll keep this one open here, and then we'll open an additional
How large
location.
is the one here?
The one here is about 50 or so children. Is all that we have room for in this space. We're completely full with a long waiting list.
Right.
But that's one area that I, in particular, again, working with some of the teachers that we have and some of the statistics that are out there that have said, if we don't get these kids to reading level by third grade or so, they're building prisons based upon those statistics, which is pretty sad. But looking at that and understanding that if we don't reach these kids and teach them right from wrong, teach them certain skills, certain work ethics, all of those kinds of things, we can literally lose a generation. And so we've decided to go down that road to expand in that area.
Well, I'm really intrigued by the geographic jump here, because how did you get involved in something that's that far away from your home campus?
Well, we saw the building, and we saw an opportunity really to be in another place to minister to a different demographic in that area. And so we seized the opportunity. We got the building at a decent cost, so we thought of an opportunity to
When do you plan to start that?
Well, we should be open. We actually have the building we're renovating now. We should be open by the end of March.
Oh, okay.
So that's the goal.
Do you work with other churches or other organizations in the community to develop any kinds of programs?
Every now and then, certain types of things come up. I mentioned Union Chapel. They have Serve Week and things like that come up. We try to be open because we do look at our church as a part of a larger Christian community. And so we can't meet every need. We can't do everything. We can't meet every person's need. Right. And so whenever it comes up, we have like concerts and things like that we participate in. We do feedings and things like that where we get involved. We just got involved with Edible Muncie, which
I know about it.
We had an event on our campus not too long ago. And so we try to stay open to those kinds of things because we look at ourselves as just part of the larger community. Yeah.
Do you think, as you might look at this from other perspectives and other places where you've been, that there is a fair amount of cooperation among churches in this area?
I would say so.
Okay.
I would say so. Again, here I'm going philosophical on you a little bit. I think God is really making a statement here with the history of Muncie, Delaware County, with the not only the racial issues that we've had, but the political divide that's been here. Yeah. I think the fact that there are so many churches and so many agencies that have worked together. Of course, my dad was heavily involved in all aspects in Anderson and Madison County, and we have conversations all the time about the difference in the mindset there than here, and even in terms of giving and just the different mindset that is there versus here. And so I think there's something that's being said about the churches working together, the agencies, the nonprofits, all of those agencies coming together for the betterment of the larger community. So,
I remember talking to your dad once in a historical context, making some reference to Muncie as, well, you know, Muncie's a real union town. And your dad's saying to me, you don't know what a real union town is until you're in Anderson. I mean, the sad thing is those are all gone now.
Yeah.
But we're talking about 20 years ago.
Sure.
And if you knew what the power of the UAW was in a place like Anderson, Indiana, it was a heck of a lot more powerful than Muncie, Indiana.
Absolutely.
What role do you see for churches in cultivating what I'm going to call a sense of citizenship among their members? Do you think it's important to preach from the pulpit the role of members of the congregation being good citizens in their community?
I do. I think it's important for us to understand that our character, our morality, how we treat people, the human dignity, all those things Jesus preached, he taught. Right. And if we're going to use him as the example, then I think that we should exemplify being a good citizen. I think we ought to work hard. I think we ought to be the most faithful We ought to be on time for our jobs. We ought to be solid people in our community. We ought to have good reputations. We ought to be givers of not only our resources, but our time and our efforts, our talents, all of those things. And so we teach all of that here.
Okay. This is a bit of a push, but I'll try it anyway. Do you think there's a connection between faith and citizenship?
I do.
Okay.
I do personally,
Well,
sure.
talk more about that. I mean, how would you articulate that if you were using that as part of a gospel message?
Well, I think our faith in Christ and our, let's say, our faithfulness and or our loyalty or commitment to the teachings of the gospel that we preach demands that manifest in some way. The scripture says faith without works is dead. In other words, it has no life in it. It doesn't mean anything. And so if our faith doesn't translate into something manifesting, either to help humanity, to do something in our communities, then it really has not a whole lot of value. So I think they're very directly related. As we live out our faith,
Okay.
it's going to be a blessing to those that are around us automatically, sure.
Do you preach that?
I do.
Okay.
I do, absolutely.
All right.
Discipleship having to do with being a disciple. It's not just being an admirer of Christ, but being a disciple means we do what he did. And so we watch how he handled people, how he dealt with the disenfranchised, how he dealt with the downtrodden, how he dealt even with those that thought more highly of themselves than they ought. He had a way of dealing with that, and I think he's the model that we're going for.
So Pharisees on one hand, lepers on the other.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, those are the only formal questions that I have for our interview, but I want to give you an opportunity to add anything that you might wish to our conversation that you see as part of what you have accomplished here and what you see as the future of Destiny Christian Center.
Yeah, well, I think God has a special calling on our church, and I would not dare say that every congregation should mirror what we're doing in terms of the multicultural, intercultural aspect of it. Every pastor doesn't have the background that I have, perhaps the calling, the demographic may not be the same. But I do believe that God is calling all of us to push the envelope to some extent, to get out of our comfort zone. If we base everything that we do on our comfort, not much is going to happen. Yeah. I think that's the thing that I've tried to keep in front of me as I lead our congregation, as I believe God to grow and to reach more people, to impact our community to a greater extent, is to always stay content but not satisfied. I think we should always look to be look beyond where we are currently to make a bigger impact. Not that bigger is always better per se, but if we're in the redemption business, if we're in the business of bettering the community, the more people we help, obviously, the more impact we're having. So that's what we're going to try to do in the future, is to continue to stay the course, to serve God, serve others, and serve the world, and do what we're called to do here at our church.
Thank you. I appreciate your participation on our project.
Thank you. Appreciate it. My pleasure.